The first sign was not light. It was the silence. Cities stopped breathing. Birds froze mid-flight. The oceans hung still as though the world had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. Then came the shapes, long, jagged, impossibly dark against the sky. They sliced through clouds with a precision that made every human instinct twitch in alarm. From the void above they observed us, the fragile creatures they had chosen to toy with. The aliens' laughter came without sound. It vibrated in the bones, a resonance that mocked life itself. Their ships hovered, impossibly vast, casting shadows over streets where people fled, but found no refuge. The air itself seemed to resist movement. Every heartbeat, every panic-stricken breath was catalogued, and in their gaze we were nothing. They descended with elegance, their weapons shimmering like ice that could cut through spirit as easily as steel. Humans had no time for organized defense. They struck with precision. A single sweep of their appendages dissolved armored vehicles like paper. Entire city blocks crumbled beneath alien whims, and yet humans did not die as expected. From the ashes of shattered streets, from the blood and smoke, pockets of defiance sparked. Children's laughter, terrified but unbroken, echoed through alleyways. Soldiers, gutted by despair, gritted their teeth and fired back, with rifles that barely scratched the invaders' armor. Every act of resistance was a joke to the aliens. Their voices, dripping with contempt, filled the skies. Pathetic, fragile, weak. But the humans endured. One man stood amidst the rubble, arm raised in a futile gesture, and the aliens noticed him. They expected him to falter. They expected him to beg. He did neither. Instead, he spat into the air and muttered so faintly the aliens could almost have missed it. No, it was not a surrender. It was a spark. The clash began in earnest. Alien appendages tore through buildings and humanity fought with whatever it could grasp. Tanks erupted in firestorms. Fighter jets screamed through the sky only to disintegrate in contact. And still, humans moved forward. Every step taken, every counterattack launched, was a defiance they could not calculate. Then came the turning point. Somewhere between fear and disbelief, the invaders realized that humans were learning. Pain was no longer a deterrent, it was fuel. Each injury, each loss, seemed to harden them, sharpen them, like iron hammered against stone. For the first time, the aliens felt a ripple of uncertainty. This was not supposed to happen. The man who had said no vanished into the smoke, yet his defiance lingered in every corner of the city. And in that lingering echo, a horrifying thought began to creep into alien minds. What if fragility was not weakness? What if the thing they had underestimated, the thing they had deemed disposable, was about to become uncontainable? Above them, the sky shimmered with energy that no human weapon could touch. The aliens readied their final strike. A crescendo of annihilation, a perfect obliteration designed to erase humanity's heartbeat from the galaxy, and then a signal, not from Earth, not from their ships. From within the chaos, faint, almost imperceptible but unmistakable, another human voice, calm, steady, almost serene. "We are not done." The aliens paused. A ripple of confusion, a shimmer of dread. For the first time, they hesitated. And in that hesitation, the world hung suspended, a breath caught between life and oblivion. Because what they did not yet understand, what no predator had ever faced, was that humanity did not simply cling to life. Humanity rejected the very idea of surrender. And when the final strike fell, when their weapons unleashed death upon us, the last word was not yes, it was no. And in that single syllable, the galaxy's predators began to tremble. The man who had started it all emerged from the shadows, bruised, bloodied, unbowed. Behind him, others gathered, drawn to the raw, unshakable will that seemed to radiate from human flesh like heat from a forge. The aliens had predicted fear to despair, immediate capitulation. What they had not accounted for was endurance. The first wave had faltered. The invaders' arrogance had cracked, and with it, the certainty of victory began to bleed away. Something ancient, something primal, surged in the hearts of humans. The knowledge that they would fight, even when nothing remained to fight for. And then came the whisper of realization among the aliens. Perhaps these creatures are not meant to be conquered. The sky was still, yet alive with tension. Every shadow, every flicker of movement carried potential. And as the humans regrouped, battered but unbroken, the invaders' own commanders hesitated. The calculations of millennia, the predictions that had guided their conquests across galaxies, no longer added up because humanity, fragile and flawed, had issued a challenge no one had ever expected. And the final strike had not yet fallen. The screen of night was punctured by one final, terrifying shimmer, a distant, ominous glow signaling a new phase, one that would decide the fate of Earth and perhaps the galaxy itself. The last word had been said, but the story had only begun. The night smelled of burning steel and scorched flesh. Cities were nothing but broken skeletons of towers and streets. Smoke choked the horizon, curling into a sky that had turned black with alien shadow. Yet, in the midst of ruin, sparks of light flickered, small, dangerous, alive. Humanity was not dead. It was awake. From the rubble, humans emerged like ghosts from a nightmare, faces smeared with soot, eyes bright with something the aliens could not understand: determination. They moved in patterns that were not chaotic, but instinctive, almost animal, honed by desperation and the stubborn refusal to die quietly. Every weapon they grasped, every makeshift bomb they fashioned from debris, carried the weight of centuries of survival. Pain had sharpened them into hunters of their own predator. The aliens watched, initially amused, their leader's voice, like a blade through the void, cut through the night. Insignificant, they will burn. They unleashed another sweep, lances of energy slicing through ruined streets, vaporizing the brave who dared to stand. And yet, humans survived. Bullets found eyes and joints where alien armor faltered. Debris became barricades, alleys became traps. One squad of soldiers vanished into a collapsed metro station, reappearing minutes later with explosives, flipping a strike that had seemed unstoppable. The aliens recoiled, the first subtle tremor of fear passing through their ranks. In the chaos, a figure moved differently. Not running, not hiding, walking steadily into the storm. Her name was Mara. She had lost everything: her family, her home, her faith that the world was safe. And yet, she carried herself as if she were the spine of the planet itself. She assessed the battlefield with a gaze that burned colder than any alien weapon. Where others panicked, she calculated. Where others faltered, she exploited. The clash escalated into a rhythm neither side fully controlled. Aliens struck with surgical precision. Humans countered with raw unpredictability. It was not technology that carried the humans forward. It was stubbornness, endurance, and an almost terrifying capacity to turn suffering into strategy. A soldier pulled himself through the rubble, his leg shattered, and detonated a charge against an alien transport, sending shards of metal screaming into the void. The aliens had never faced prey that laughed in the face of death. Then came the turning point. In the heart of a crumbling skyscraper, Mara discovered something neither she nor the aliens expected: a dormant energy pulse, buried in the city's power grid. With careful improvisation, she rigged it to amplify human movements, turning every small action into a potential weapon against the invaders. Humans began to feel it, the subtle shift of power, the realization that pain was no longer purely a cost, it was leverage. The aliens noticed it too. Confusion flickered across their sleek faces. Calculations, predictions, strategies, they all failed to account for a species that would endure, adapt, and fight without reason, but with perfect, terrifying effectiveness. Whispers rippled through their ranks. "They are learning. They are..." becoming dangerous, but the humans did not wait for hesitation. They struck in waves. Teams that should have been annihilated re-emerged from smoke and shadow to sabotage supply lines, collapse bridges, and ignite explosives beneath alien feet. Each attack carried a rhythm, a defiance that spread like fire from one city to another. Even wounded, even exhausted, humans pushed forward, dragging pain with them as armor. And yet, for all their courage, the aliens were still the predators. Mara knew the night would end in fire. She felt it in her bones. Every explosion, every alien shriek was a warning that the final strike was near. But humans had tasted a new kind of power. They had glimpsed that their suffering could be weaponized. That knowledge, small and fragile, was more terrifying to the invaders than any laser, any fleet, any war machine. From the blackened horizon, a new shadow appeared, not like the previous ships, not like any shape the humans had seen before. Vast, impossibly vast, it seemed to absorb the stars themselves. Energy pulsed across its hull, humming in a frequency that rattled bones and souls alike. The aliens, usually so confident, froze. Their leader's voice cracked, unheard by humans, but sharp in alien minds. "Impossible!" How can they? Mara felt it too. The pulse thrummed through the ground beneath her feet, a heartbeat larger than any human, yet somehow aligned with hers. She looked to the others, saw their exhaustion, their pain, their defiance, and knew that whatever came next, they would not back down. Not now, not ever. And then, before anyone could react, the pulse rippled outward, enveloping the battlefield in a glow that twisted reality. Structures warped. Alien weapons misfired. Humans fell and rose as if the world had become liquid, yet none of them broke. The voice that had whispered before, the calm voice that had challenged the void, spoke again, louder this time, echoing through streets, through debris, through shattered minds. "We are not done." Not by far. The aliens recoiled, their arrogance giving way to a creeping, unnatural fear. Every prediction they had relied on crumbled, replaced by a terror they had never known. And in that terror, humanity found something greater than strength, greater than steel: inevitability. The last word had been said once, but now in the glow of that impossible pulse, a new story began to write itself. And the humans were holding the pen, and somewhere far above the broken cities, the shape in the sky shifted, and a low, resonant vibration echoed downwards, a promise of destruction and a question. Would the fragile prey finally be crushed, or had they stumbled into something no predator could survive? The battlefield fell into eerie silence. Mara's pulse raced. Around her, humans waited, poised, ready. And in that suspended heartbeat, the universe itself seemed to lean forward, waiting for the answer. Because the last word had been no. But the first act of the real war was about to begin. The sky burned with fractured light. Shadows of alien vessels stretched across the ruins like claws frozen mid-strike. Humanity had survived the first wave. Now they moved not like desperate prey, but like predators learning the art of patience. Every step, every strike was deliberate. Every pause carried the weight of calculation. Mara led a small squad through the crumbling streets, eyes sharp, mind sharper. The humans knew the aliens were powerful, immensely so. Their weapons cut steel like paper. Their bodies were encased in armor that defied bullets, fire, even bombs. Yet power alone could not predict chaos, and humans had mastered chaos. They struck at night when shadows were thickest. One team disabled a key energy node, sending a ripple through the alien network of communication. Another detonated improvised charges in an abandoned rail system, collapsing tunnels beneath alien supply lines. Each strike was small, almost invisible, but cumulative. The invaders began to notice patterns they could not trace. The aliens' mocking voices began to waver.
"Clever, but insignificant," one hissed.
But even as they spoke, sensors flickered, systems glitched. Calculations that should have predicted victory no longer aligned with reality. Humans had no technology that should have mattered, and yet somehow it did. Pain had become their weapon. Each wound sharpened focus.
Every loss hardened resolve.
Soldiers moved with shattered bones, with scorched lungs, with bleeding hands. Yet their attacks became more precise, more unpredictable. Aliens began to anticipate nothing, to react to chaos, and in that reaction, mistakes were born. The turning point came in the ruins of a government complex, a skeletal monument to human ambition. Mara's squad lured an alien patrol into a collapsed courtyard. They had no heavy weapons, no advanced tech, just grit, fire, and a deep understanding that the aliens could not anticipate. When the aliens struck, the humans were already gone. Explosions ripped the courtyard apart, leaving the invaders trapped in a crumbling maze. For the first time, the invaders screamed, not with arrogance, but with terror. The air shimmered with alien energy, but humans had adapted. They could predict it, manipulate it, and bend it against their oppressors. Their endurance had become a strategy, their defiance a weapon of mass disruption. And somewhere in the alien command, uncertainty began to spread like a virus. One officer's voice, sharp with disbelief, pierced the void. "They cannot survive this long.
They are not built for endurance. They should be finished." And yet they were not finished. A lone human figure stood atop the rubble of what had been a government tower.
Bloodied, exhausted, but unbroken, Mara's eyes met his, and a silent understanding passed between them. They were small, fragile, mortal, but the weight of their will was immeasurable. The invaders had assumed fragility meant weakness. They had been wrong, but the aliens would not yield, not yet. They regrouped, their ships forming new formations, readying new strategies. Yet with each adjustment, the humans adapted faster. Pain and fear fueled them. Injury and loss sharpened them. And with every failed strike, alien confidence eroded, replaced by that creeping, unfamiliar emotion: doubt. From the depths of the destroyed city, a pulse unlike any before spread outward. Not from human technology, but from the planet itself, or something deep beneath it. The ground trembled, vibrating in a rhythm that made both human and alien hearts skip. Structures that had seemed stable began to shift. Alien sensors went haywire. Mara's squad froze mid-step, eyes wide, as the pulse intensified, throbbing like a heartbeat that could not be ignored. And then the sky tore. Not with light, not with fire, but with a soundless, incomprehensible pressure that pressed into the soul. The alien command reeled, the leaders screaming calculations into voids that no longer made sense. Mara felt the vibration in her chest, in her bones, as if something vast, ancient, and aware had noticed them and was choosing to intervene. A figure appeared at the edge of the tremor, not fully human, not fully imagined. A shadow, tall and impossibly still, watching, observing, weighing. Humans and aliens alike hesitated, caught in a moment suspended between fear and revelation. The aliens, for the first time, showed something entirely alien to them: hesitation. The humans, for the first time, felt awe mixed with terror, but not enough to falter. Because in the face of the unknown, they still refused to kneel, and somewhere, beyond comprehension, the pulse pulsed again.
A voice, or something like it, whispered in every mind.
Human and alien alike. This will not end as you think. The ruins fell silent, save for the faint, almost imperceptible hum that resonated in every corner of the world. Mara and her squad stood ready. The aliens braced themselves, trembling in a way no prey had ever made them tremble before. And somewhere, deep beneath the surface, the planet itself seemed to inhale, preparing to speak. The last word had been no. But now, the answer was coming. The tremor was subtle at first, a vibration underfoot, a quiver in the rubble, almost imperceptible, but humans felt it.
Mara felt it.
It was not fear, not exactly, but awareness, a signal that the world itself was no longer neutral. Beneath the broken streets and shattered towers, something ancient had stirred, and it was watching, waiting, judging. Humans had learned to survive on instinct, but now they had a new edge. The pulse was a rhythm, and rhythm meant pattern. Where the aliens relied on brute force and predictable algorithms, humans moved like flowing water, exploiting fissures, bends, and gaps no calculation could predict. Each strike, each ambush became a dance. Pain fueled precision. Fatigue sharpened judgment. Every fallen comrade became a lesson etched into the minds of the survivors. The aliens, for all their arrogance, began to notice. Commands came from above, crisp and mechanical, but laced with panic.
Contain them.
Eliminate all interference.
They cannot survive. Adjust tactics.
Adjust tactics. They had never needed to adjust. Never before had a species endured what humans had. And now, with every adjustment, they faltered. Their strategies unraveling like loose threads in a tapestry of war. Mara led her team into the ruins of a power plant, following the pulse like a predator following scent. The machines inside were broken, cables sparking, furnaces leaking smoke, yet the pulse guided them. They rigged makeshift devices, amplifying the vibrations through the building, through the ground, until each step of a human warrior became a hammer against alien armor. The first clash in this new rhythm was brutal. Alien troops advanced through the corridors, confident, mocking, certain they were about to sweep away the survivors. But Mara's team had learned patience. They struck in waves, shadows striking shadows, metal crashing against metal, blood and fire mixing with the hum of the pulse. Every attack seemed impossible to predict, and the aliens found themselves caught in a storm of randomness, orchestrated with intention. Pain became strategy. When a soldier was hit, his cries became a lure. When a building collapsed, it became a trap. Every loss became leverage. Every injury a weapon sharpened by will. The aliens' laughter had turned brittle. Their confidence was cracking. They no longer mocked. They calculated desperately, frantically, trying to anticipate a species that refused to follow any rules they understood. And then came the turning point. One of Mara's devices triggered an energy surge, sending a shock wave through the plant. Alien armor melted, circuits fried, weapons failed. The pulse reverberated outward, reaching the streets, shaking buildings that had seemed secure. The aliens were no longer in control. Humans were moving like extensions of the pulse itself, a collective force that no predator could anticipate. In that moment, Mara realized something terrifying and exhilarating. They were no longer just surviving. They were influencing the battlefield itself. The world had become an ally, its tremors and vibrations a language the humans could read, a weapon the aliens could not counter. The galaxy's most feared conquerors had stumbled into an opponent they could not destroy because they could not even comprehend them. The aliens regrouped, their formations faltering. For the first time, They questioned their own calculations. They had faced predators before, hunters sharper, stronger, more cunning, but none had endured this. None had turned pain into power, fear into fuel, suffering into strategy. Humanity was rewriting the rules of engagement in real time. From the distance, beyond the ruined skyline, a shadow moved across the horizon, unlike anything the aliens had anticipated.
Vast, dark, impossibly fast.
Its trajectory suggested it was headed straight for the center of human resistance.
Mara froze, her pulse sinking with the vibration underfoot.
The air itself seemed to hold its breath. The aliens noticed it too. Their leader's voice, usually steady and commanding, trembled. "Impossible!"
It cannot, but the figure kept coming. A shape massive enough to blot out the sky, yet precise in movement.
Not a fleet, not a single ship, but something else entirely. Something intelligent, something that had waited, biding its time. The pulse thrummed stronger, resonating in every human chest, every alien hull, every shattered corner of the city. Mara's squad braced themselves. Around them, humans stared at the horizon, exhaustion and fear written in every face, but also resolve. They knew the invaders would strike again. They knew the odds were impossible, but they had discovered something no alien could ever calculate. Humanity did not yield. Humanity endured, and endurance, now amplified by the pulse beneath the world, could bend the impossible to its will. The shadow slowed as it approached, revealing glimpses of something vast, armored and alive. The aliens faltered, the first tendrils of fear curling through them like smoke. Mara inhaled deeply, feeling the pulse rise in her veins, feeling the surge of all that humanity had endured, all that had been sharpened in the crucible of fire and blood, and in that suspended heartbeat. The world held its breath, because the next move would decide everything. The last word had been no. But the first strike of true defiance, the strike that would echo into history, was about to land. By dawn, the world was unrecognizable. Cities had become ruins, highways rivers of ash, forests mere skeletons against a grey sky. But humanity had learned to move in the gaps, in the shadows, in the spaces the aliens assumed were empty. They had become unseen, unpredictable, lethal in their persistence. Mara surveyed the battlefield from the roof of a half-collapsed skyscraper. Her squad gathered behind her, eyes wide with exhaustion but burning with focus. The pulse beneath the planet had grown stronger, more insistent. It guided them, whispered warnings and opportunities. Every tremor, every resonance was a thread they could follow, a path through death that no alien could anticipate. The aliens' arrogance had turned brittle. Their formations were fractured, their patrols vulnerable. Communications that should have been flawless were riddled with interference.
Mara knew it. The galaxy's most precise predators were being undone by the persistence of humans and by a force they could not understand. The first strike came in silence.
Small teams emerged from the rubble, moving with the precision of hunters. They cut through supply lines, sabotaged power nodes, and collapsed bridges under alien feet. Each attack was coordinated, deliberate, almost surgical in its execution. And always, the pulse pulsed through them, connecting them to one another, to the city, to something larger than any single human could comprehend. Pain was no longer a hindrance. Every injury, every loss had been harnessed into a weapon.
A soldier with a shattered leg rigged explosives under a patrol and detonated them remotely.
The explosion sent shards of alien armor screaming into the sky. The invaders screamed too, first with surprise, then with fear. The turning point came when Mara's squad intercepted a key alien communications hub. They had no technology that could match the invaders, only ingenuity, coordination, and the pulse. Using makeshift transmitters and the vibrations in the ground, they disrupted the alien network, turning the fleet's coordination into chaos. Alien commanders barked orders that never reached their troops. Formations collided. Weapons fired prematurely. Calculations failed, and humans did not pause. They struck again and again, exploiting every fracture.
Mara watched as a patrol, confident and arrogant, advanced into a street rigged with improvised traps.
One by one, the aliens fell, confused, off balance, terrified in ways they had never known. Their confidence was crumbling faster than any weapon could. Then came the whisper of realization among the aliens. They were facing not just persistence, but strategy born of suffering. Humans had turned endurance into an advantage, fragility into unpredictability. Their patience was infinite, their will unbreakable, and in that realization, fear took root. But the humans had more to reveal. The pulse beneath the planet surged, shaking foundations, rattling buildings, whispering warnings to those who could listen. Mara felt it in her bones. It guided them toward the alien command center, an imposing fortress the invaders had assumed untouchable. If they struck it, they could cripple the invaders' control entirely. From the shadows, a new threat emerged. Not a ship, not a patrol, but a single figure, vast and alien, standing where no human should have survived. Its armor shimmered with energy unlike anything Mara had seen. It radiated authority, power, and a dangerous intelligence that chilled the spine. The aliens faltered, their voice trembling. They cannot. How are they still? Mara's pulse surged in response. She knew what she had to do. Humans had endured worse. They had adapted, evolved under fire, and now they had a chance to strike decisively. She raised her hand to her squad, silent.
One motion, one signal, and they moved forward.
Shadows among shadows, guided by the pulse, guided by will, guided by a refusal to surrender. The alien commander shifted, noticing the humans' approach, and something rare flickered across its expression. Doubt. And just as they prepared to engage, the fortress trembled from below, the pulse intensifying into a force that twisted reality itself. Windows shattered, walls cracked, and alien weapons misfired. Mara froze mid-step, eyes scanning her squad. They had survived everything so far. They could survive this, but the figure in the shadows raised its weapon, a device humming with energy that Mara could feel in her chest. And then it spoke, its voice like steel scraping bone. "You will die here."
All of you. Mara's lips curled into the faintest smile.
She did not speak. She did not need to. She simply raised her hand, and the pulse thrummed in answer. The last word had been no, but the first strike that would echo through history, the strike that
I would teach predators fear, was about to land. The battle for
Earth had entered a new, impossible phase. The world was alive with a rhythm the aliens could not predict. Buildings trembled as if breathing, streets quaked underfoot, and the air itself seemed to pulse with a hidden energy. Mara felt it coursing through her, an invisible current binding her to every human soldier on the battlefield. They were no longer scattered survivors. They were one organism, moving with precision born of desperation and endurance. Alien forces, once confident and arrogant, faltered. Their patrols moved hesitantly, unsure where to strike, unsure how to anticipate human strategy. Their weapons, so precise and deadly, began to misfire, disrupted by the subtle vibrations the humans had learned to read, to amplify, to turn against their enemies. Fear, an emotion they had never experienced before, crept through their ranks. Mara led a strike team through the shattered remains of a government district. They moved with silence and patience, striking only when the opportunity was perfect. One by one, alien squads fell, caught in traps fashioned from rubble, fire, and ingenuity. Every loss strengthened the survivors, hardening them into something the aliens could neither destroy nor fully comprehend. The turning point came when Mara identified a command nexus, the brain
of the alien operation on this sector of Earth.
She knew that if they could disrupt it, they could tip the balance. She signaled her team, and they split into coordinated groups, each moving like a shadow, each exploiting the alien weaknesses they had discovered over weeks of blood and fire. Pain had become power. Wounded soldiers crawled through debris to plant explosives. Burns and cuts were irrelevant. They had become tools of focus, sharpening every movement. Every human action was unpredictable, chaotic to the invaders, yet precise and purposeful in intent. The aliens could not anticipate it. They could not calculate it. And then came the first real shock. A massive alien vessel, previously thought immobile, responded to the humans' interference in ways no calculation had predicted. Its hull shimmered with energy, and a pulse unlike any before radiated outward, warping space around it. Human teams were thrown off balance, rubble and dust sweeping through the streets like a storm. Yet Mara's squad pressed on, guided by the underlying rhythm of the pulse, the invisible force that had become both ally and weapon. The aliens' fear grew. Commands faltered. Calculations crumbled.
Strategies that should have ensured victory were failing at every turn.
Their arrogance, the foundation of their conquests, was cracking under the persistent pressure of human endurance. Mara's hand rose, signaling her squad to plant charges at critical junctions around the command nexus. Explosives detonated in perfect succession, sending energy rippling outward, severing communication lines and collapsing support structures. The invaders panicked. Ships misaligned, weapons fired at nothing. Troops retreated in confusion, and humans advanced. In the center of the battlefield, Mara saw the alien commander, the vast armored figure who had once threatened them all. Its presence was imposing, terrifying, but Mara no longer felt fear,
only determination.
She advanced, every step fueled by months of survival, pain, and defiance. The pulse thrummed in sync with her heartbeat, amplifying her awareness, guiding her actions. The commander unleashed a weapon of pure energy, a blast meant to annihilate everything in its path. Mara's squad dove, rolled, and rose again, unharmed, riding the pulse as though it were a shield. The alien shrieked in frustration, a sound unfamiliar in the cold, calculated tones of its kind. The pulse beneath the planet intensified, a force so strong it shook the very ground. Mara felt it surge through her veins, connecting her to every human and every corner of the battlefield. But then, from the shadow of a collapsed skyscraper, a new figure emerged. Not human, not fully alien, something else. Vast, terrifying, and aware. Its eyes, or whatever passed for eyes, locked on Mara. Its voice echoed in the minds of both humans and aliens. You are not meant to survive this.
Yet you persist. Why?
Mara stood, bleeding, bruised, exhausted. She did not flinch. She did not speak. She simply raised her hand toward the figure, toward the pulse, and the ground answered. The last word had been no. But now, every human on the battlefield understood. Survival was no longer enough. The fight had become something larger, something unstoppable. And the true war, the war that would echo across the stars, was only just beginning. The battlefield had become a theater of shadows and fire, of ruin and persistence. Smoke coiled over shattered streets, carrying the tang of metal and blood, drifting into the alien sky like a warning they could not ignore. Humanity had survived long enough to learn. They had endured enough pain to transform fragility into weaponry, despair into strategy, and suffering into power. Now they were moving beyond mere survival. Mara's eyes swept the horizon. She saw the jagged silhouettes of alien vessels, the glint of their weapons, the unnatural precision of their movements. But she also saw hesitation, a ripple of doubt that had never before marred the confidence of the galaxy's greatest predators. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. And that subtle hesitation would be enough. Her squad moved like shadows along broken rooftops, silent, calculated. Every footstep, every breath was guided by the pulse beneath the planet, a rhythm that humans had learned to read and manipulate. They could sense it in the tremor of the concrete under their hands, in the quiver of debris as they ducked behind walls, even in the faint hum of shattered machinery. The pulse had become more than a tool. It had become an ally. The aliens had grown careless, their arrogance eroding under pressure they could not predict. They assumed humans would act in patterns dictated by fear or instinct. They assumed injury, pain, and loss would break them. They were wrong. Humans had learned to bend chaos to their will. Pain sharpened reflexes, suffering focused attention, exhaustion honed patience. Every human movement was unpredictable, yet precise, a blend of instinct and intention the aliens could not compute. Mara signaled her team, and they split into coordinated units. One squad slipped through the rubble-littered streets to disable supply lines. Another scaled the remnants of a government tower to position explosives above a critical alien transit hub. Every strike was designed to exploit the invaders' weaknesses, but not by force alone. It was subtle, intelligent, and terrifying because it came from nowhere. The aliens had no concept of a prey that could strike with such discipline born entirely of defiance. The first clash was sudden. Alien patrols descended into an alley, confident, arrogant, and completely unprepared for the ambush waiting in the shadows. Mara's squad waited for the precise moment. A flash, a movement, and suddenly the patrol was enveloped in a barrage of improvised explosives. Metal screeched, energy shields faltered, and the aliens screamed in disbelief. It was not a massacre, they were too few, but it was enough to seed panic. Enough to make them hesitate, enough to plant the first real crack in the line. Pain became strategy. A soldier with a shattered arm crawled under a disabled alien turret and rerouted power through a makeshift circuit. When the turret powered up again, it fired upon its own ranks. Confusion spread like wildfire. Every human casualty was transformed into a lesson. Every injury turned into a weapon. The aliens, once unyielding, were now reacting to chaos, a force they could not control. And the turning point was approaching. From the ruins of a skyscraper, Mara observed a key alien command node. The building had been fortified beyond reason, or so the aliens assumed, but the pulse beneath the ground revealed a vulnerability. Tremors suggested the structural supports were compromised, weakened by both the ongoing conflict and the subtle manipulation of human engineers. Mara's squad readied charges, improvising tools from what little remained of their broken world. Then came the ripple of dread. The alien commander, the massive figure who had stalked the battlefield since the first wave, appeared atop a hovering platform. Its armor shimmered with energy that could melt steel, its presence a manifestation of absolute certainty. It spoke, its voice slicing through the smoke and ruins, sharp and venomous. You will break. You are insignificant. Your world will die. Mara did not flinch. Her pulse synced with the rhythm beneath her feet. She signaled the detonation, and in an instant the building trembled violently. Explosions ripped through critical supports, sending debris raining like jagged hail. Alien forces inside were thrown into disarray. Weapons misfired, shields faltered, and panic replaced precision. The commander's eyes narrowed in disbelief, but the humans were not finished. They moved through the chaos, coordinated, relentless, exploiting every mistake the aliens made. A human team,
bleeding and exhausted, collapsed a bridge beneath a patrol fleet, sending a transport crashing into rubble.
Another team lit fires along narrow streets, forcing aliens into choke points, turning their superior numbers into a liability. Every act, small and brutal, was amplified by the pulse, a force that humans had learned to anticipate and manipulate. The aliens' confidence, once absolute, was shattered. Calculations that had predicted victory were meaningless. Every assumption they held about prey, about fragility, about inevitability, had been destroyed.
And in that destruction they began to panic.
Orders collided. Troops froze. Weapons fired without command. The predators of the galaxy were no longer in control. Mara's squad advanced toward the heart of the command node. The pulse underfoot surged, vibrating in perfect harmony with their intent. Explosives detonated at precise intervals, ripping through walls and corridors. Alien reinforcements arrived too late, stumbling into traps meticulously prepared in silence. Every strike was coordinated, unrelenting, and terrifying in its effectiveness. The turning point had arrived. Humans were no longer prey. They were hunters. They were a force that the aliens could not predict, could not calculate, and increasingly could not survive. And as Mara moved toward the command center, she realized that the pulse itself, whatever ancient force it was amplifying more than human endurance. It was amplifying will, defiance, the raw, unbreakable persistence that had carried them through weeks of devastation. From the rubble of a nearby skyscraper, a new shadow emerged.
Massive, impossibly fast and intelligent.
It was unlike any alien they had fought, unlike any predator in the galaxy. Its presence radiated power and awareness, a consciousness that could perceive strategy as if it were prey itself. The aliens froze, their voice trembling for the first time. Impossible.
How do they...
Mara stared, heart pounding but unyielding. She did not hesitate. She raised her hand, signaling her squad to continue, to strike, to fight. The pulse responded, thrumming violently beneath their feet, a wave of raw, untamed energy that seemed to amplify every human action. The figure in the shadows advanced. Its gaze locked on Mara. Its voice, resonant and alien, echoed across the battlefield. You were not meant to survive this.
Why do you persist?
Mara's lips curled into the faintest, bloody smile. She did not speak. She did not have to. She raised her hand once more, and the ground answered, shaking, pulsing, bending the battlefield itself in defiance of the invaders. The aliens faltered. The predator that had once been untouchable now hesitated, and humans, fragile, battered, bleeding, unbroken, advanced. The last word had been no, and in that single, unyielding syllable, the galaxy's most feared conquerors learned the first terrifying truth about the species they had underestimated. The war was far from over, but humanity had broken the line, and somewhere deep beneath the city, the pulse hummed, alive, aware, and ready. The battlefield no longer belonged to the aliens. Their vast, gleaming vessels hovered like wounded predators, unsure where to strike, unsure which humans would appear next from the ruins, the shadows, the rubble. Their arrogance, once absolute, had cracked into shards, revealing the first glimpse of fear, a sensation they had never endured. The predators were no longer the hunters. Humans, bleeding, battered, and exhausted, were now the storm. Mara moved through the streets with her squad, their movements seamless, choreographed by instinct and the pulse that thrummed beneath the city. Every step was deliberate. Every breath was measured. The aliens had relied on superiority, on calculations and numbers, on weapons that could level mountains. But humans had learned the one thing the invaders could not anticipate. Endurance made strategy unpredictable. Pain sharpened instinct. Fear became fuel. and suffering became their weapon. The first strike of the day was subtle but devastating. Small squads moved along fractured streets, picking apart supply lines, collapsing bridges and sabotaging energy nodes. Alien patrols advanced, confident, only to find themselves caught in traps engineered from debris, fire, and pure human cunning. The aliens had expected chaos, but they had never faced a species capable of orchestrating chaos into precise, deadly attacks. The turning point came when Mara led her team toward a massive alien transport hovering over the city. Its hull pulsed with energy, shielding it from conventional weapons. But the pulse beneath the city, something ancient, something alive, responded to human intent. Tremors spread along the ground, vibrations that Mara had learned to read and amplify. With careful timing, her squad triggered makeshift charges buried in the foundations of surrounding buildings. Explosions reverberated through the streets, sending shockwaves that destabilized the alien vessel. Its weapons misfired, shields flickered. Troops aboard scrambled in confusion. The aliens began to panic. They had faced intelligent prey before, but never a species that could manipulate the battlefield itself, that could turn environmental hazards into coordinated traps. Their calculations failed, their orders collided, and their once perfect strategies dissolved into chaos. For the first time, the invaders realized that they were not simply facing human ingenuity, they were facing a force they could not predict, could not control, and increasingly could not survive. Mara's squad pressed the advantage. They moved like shadows, striking at command nodes, communication hubs, and critical supply depots. Every human action seemed amplified, synchronized with the pulse beneath the city. Even the wounded pressed forward, using splintered walls and broken vehicles as weapons. Pain no longer slowed them, it sharpened them. Every scar, every wound, every loss became a tool to exploit, and the aliens were unraveling. The commander, the massive figure who had once exuded unshakable confidence, now hesitated. Its calculations faltered, and for the first time it felt uncertainty. Orders that should have been obeyed went unheeded. Troops froze mid-action, unsure of what was safe, unsure of what would strike next. Panic spread like wildfire. Their arrogance, the foundation of their dominion, had been broken. The humans were relentless. They struck across multiple fronts simultaneously. Mara's squad coordinated attacks with other survivor groups, creating a web of destruction the aliens could not counter. Bridges collapsed under enemy weight.
Streets erupted in fire.
Supply convoys were ambushed. Every strike, small but precise, amplified the sense of helplessness among the invaders. And then came the revelation that would terrify the aliens even further.
Mara realized the pulse beneath the planet was not just a passive force, it was responsive.
It seemed aware, almost sentient. When humans acted with intent, it amplified their actions. When aliens moved, it resisted, disrupting them, twisting their precision into self-destruction. Humans had discovered something the invaders could not comprehend. The world itself could be an ally. The turning point reached its apex when Mara's squad infiltrated the central alien command hub in the city. The aliens had expected an organized retreat or a futile defense. Instead, they found humans exploiting every weakness. Communications collapsed, shields flickered and failed.
Energy weapons misfired spectacularly.
Panic became hysteria. Alien troops turned on one another in confusion, unable to discern friend from foe amid the chaos orchestrated by humans and the pulse. The aliens' fear grew exponentially. Calculations that had once guaranteed victory no longer worked. Troops hesitated, unsure how to proceed. Commanders screamed orders into voids that yielded no response. Every decision, every movement, every strike was met with unexpected resistance. For the first time, the invaders understood that they were no longer masters, they were prey, and humanity pressed the advantage. Mara and her squad moved to the heart of the city. From the rooftops, they could see alien formations breaking apart, ships faltering, troops in confusion. The pulse beneath their feet surged, responding to the collective intent of human resistance. It shook buildings, disrupted weapons, and amplified every attack. Humans moved in perfect synchrony with it, striking in waves that seemed impossible to anticipate.
Every action, every strike, every calculated move spread panic through the alien ranks. But the aliens were not defeated yet. From the horizon, a new shadow appeared, a colossal shape, faster and larger than anything they had faced.
Its presence radiated authority, intelligence, and raw power. The aliens, already in panic, faltered further, their confidence shattered. The commander's voice, once calm and absolute, broke. Impossible.
How are they? Mara's pulse surged, synchronizing with the rhythm beneath her feet.
She signaled her squad. They moved forward, shadows among shadows, exploiting every fracture the aliens' fear had created. The colossal figure advanced, its attention fixed on her, its presence overwhelming, yet she did not flinch. She felt the pulse respond, a wave of energy that seemed to acknowledge her defiance. The battlefield became a spiral of fear. Alien troops scattered in confusion, ships misfired, weapons failed, and commanders shouted into voids that yielded no obedience. Every act of human resistance was amplified by the pulse, and the invaders realized they were facing more than soldiers. They were facing a species that had turned endurance into strategy, suffering into weaponry, and defiance into an unstoppable force. Mara's squad struck at the alien command hub. Explosions tore through walls, energy discharged in chaotic arcs, and the colossal figure advanced, its gaze locked on Mara. The aliens panicked. Troops scattered. Communications failed. The pulse responded, amplifying every strike, every movement, every act of human will. From the shadows of a collapsed skyscraper, the colossal figure finally spoke, its voice resonating in every mind present. You are not meant to survive this.
Why do you persist?
Mara's lips curled into a faint, bloody smile. She did not answer. She raised her hand toward the figure, toward the pulse, and the ground responded. Tremors surged violently, buildings shifted, alien weapons misfired spectacularly. Humans advanced relentlessly, unbroken, unyielding, and unafraid. The last word had been no. And in that moment, humanity's defiance became a force the galaxy's predators had never encountered. The spiral of fear had begun, and it would consume them all. The war was far from over. But the first true victory, the first undeniable proof that humanity could turn pain, suffering, and endurance into unstoppable power, had begun. The world had shifted. Cities were rubble, forests blackened, rivers of fire flowing where highways once ran. The air trembled with the pulse beneath the planet, a rhythm humans had learned to wield. Alien fleets hovered, massive and terrifying, but their precision was gone. Their arrogance, their supreme confidence, had fractured under a barrage of unpredictability they could neither calculate nor anticipate. Humans had turned survival into strategy, suffering into weaponry, endurance into an unstoppable force. Mara stood atop a crumbling tower, her eyes sweeping across the ruined skyline. The pulse thrummed beneath her feet, synchronized with her heartbeat. It guided her, whispered warnings, amplified intent, a weapon forged from the planet itself. Around her, squads moved like shadows, coordinating without words, striking where the aliens least expected. Each step, each strike, each movement resonated with a force far greater than human strength alone. The aliens were losing control. Commanders shouted into silent channels. Formations collapsed.
Energy weapons misfired.
Troops froze, paralyzed by the uncertainty that had never touched their species before. They had underestimated endurance. They had underestimated defiance. They had assumed fragility equaled weakness. They had been wrong. Mara signaled her squads to advance simultaneously on multiple fronts. Supply depots, communication hubs, armored transports. Every target became a nexus of chaos. Explosions erupted across the city, punctuating the alien panic with deafening clarity. Humans moved in perfect coordination, each act amplified by the pulse beneath them, each strike exploiting the cracks fear had made in the invaders' ranks. The turning point came when Mara's team breached the central alien command hub. It was massive, imposing, armored in a way that had once seemed invincible. But humans had learned that even the strongest fortress could be undone by endurance, by cunning, and by the subtle guidance of the pulse. Explosives were planted, triggers set, timing calculated to perfection. The invaders inside scrambled, their confidence shattered. Weapons flared, misfired, and chaos consumed them. Pain was no longer a liability, it was strategy. Wounded soldiers crawled through corridors, manually rerouting power to destabilize alien defenses. Every injury, every scar, every loss was weaponized, converted into an advantage. The aliens could not anticipate it. They could not predict it. They could only react, and reaction was no longer sufficient. Outside, the battlefield spiraled further into chaos. Alien transports faltered, ships collided, patrols scattered. Mara's squads struck simultaneously across the city, exploiting every weakness, every crack, every hesitation. Panic became contagious, spreading like wildfire through the invader ranks. Their algorithms, once flawless, were useless. Their arrogance had been replaced by confusion, their control usurped by human will and planetary power. Then came the colossal figure, the one that had appeared in the shadows, immense, intelligent, terrifying. It observed Mara, unblinking, its presence radiating authority and power. Its voice echoed across the battlefield, resonating in the minds of both humans and aliens. You are not meant to endure this.
Why do you persist? Mara did not flinch.
She did not hesitate. She raised her hand, signaling the squads to continue, to strike, to move as one with the pulse. The ground beneath the colossal figure trembled violently. Explosions tore through walls, energy arcs flared, alien weapons misfired spectacularly. Humans advanced relentlessly, unbroken, unyielding, unafraid. The aliens' fear reached a tipping point. Their formations collapsed entirely. Commanders screamed into voids that yielded no obedience. Troops fled, paralyzed by a fear they could not rationalize. Their arrogance turned to dread. And in the midst of it, humans pressed their advantage. Every city block became a crucible, every street an opportunity, every ruin a trap. The pulse responded, a force that amplified human intent beyond comprehension. Structures shifted as if alive. Streets trembled to throw alien weapons off target. Debris moved in synchronization with human strategy. Humanity had turned endurance into planetary-scale defiance, and the invaders could not stop it. Mara's squad reached the core of the command hub. The aliens inside were panicked, uncertain, scrambling for control that no longer existed. Explosives detonated in perfect sequence, sending shockwaves through the structure. Communications collapsed. Shields flickered and failed. Troops were trapped in corridors that had become death traps, manipulated by humans who understood how to turn pain and destruction into weaponized precision. From the horizon, a new shadow appeared, darker, larger, and faster than anything humanity had faced. Its trajectory suggested it was targeting the very center of human resistance, a strike designed to annihilate them all in a single blow. Alien forces trembled, their confidence shattered entirely. The commander's voice cracked. Impossible.
They should have perished.
Yet they persist. Mara's pulse surged through her veins, synchronized with the rhythm beneath the planet. She knew the humans could survive it. She knew that endurance, defiance, and strategy had transformed fragile humans into something unstoppable. She signaled her squads to brace, to strike preemptively, to exploit every weakness that fear had created. The colossal shadow descended, and the battlefield trembled. Fires roared, rubble shifted, and alien weapons misfired in spectacular chaos. Humans advanced like one organism, coordinated, relentless, guided by a force the invaders could not comprehend. They had turned pain, suffering, and endurance into power, planetary scale power. And then, in the midst of the chaos, Mara realized something terrifying and exhilarating. The pulse beneath the planet was not just a weapon. It was alive, aware, responsive to human intent. It amplified every strike, every movement, every act of defiance. The invaders could not calculate it, could not resist it, and could not survive it if humanity continued. The last word had been no. But now, humanity's defiance had grown beyond survival, beyond tactical strikes. It had become dominion. The aliens would learn, finally, that endurance, pain, and defiance were not weaknesses. They were the instruments of their undoing, and the final battle, the one that would echo across the galaxy, was imminent. The world had become unrecognizable. Cities were skeletal ruins, their hollowed frames silhouetted against a sky streaked with fire and smoke. Rivers of molten steel and ash carved paths through streets that once teemed with life. Forests were reduced to charred skeletons. Humanity had endured beyond expectation, beyond logic, beyond every calculation the invaders had ever made. They were bleeding, broken, exhausted, but alive. And now they were no longer merely surviving. They were about to finish what they had begun. Mara stood on the edge of a crumbling tower, the pulse beneath the planet thrumming through her very bones. It had become a rhythm she could feel, a weapon she could wield, a guide that linked her to every human fighting across the fractured battlefield. The alien forces hovered above, massive and arrogant, but their precision had vanished. Panic had replaced confidence, hesitation replaced certainty. The invaders were prey in a game they could no longer calculate. The colossal figure from the shadows had emerged fully now, its presence suffocating, its energy radiating with a power that defied imagination. It moved like a predator, aware of every human position, yet it faltered. The pulse beneath the planet, responding to human will, had begun to bend its perception, twist its strategy, and disrupt its absolute certainty. Mara felt the resonance, felt the energy intertwining with her squad, guiding every step, every breath, every calculated strike. They had endured months of fire and blood. They had been wounded, beaten, and humiliated. Yet every scar, every broken bone, every drop of blood was now a weapon sharpened by will. Pain was no longer weakness. It was precision. Suffering was no longer burden. It was fuel. And endurance had become a force the invaders could neither destroy nor comprehend. Mara signaled her squads across the city. Every team moved with synchronization born of instinct, experience, and the pulse itself. Supply lines collapsed in coordinated chaos. Energy nodes exploded in waves that destabilized entire sectors. Alien patrols, once confident, scattered, disoriented, their armor and weaponry failing spectacularly under the pressure of relentless, unpredictable assault. Every strike, every movement, every act of human defiance amplified the chaos. The turning point came when Mara led her team into the heart of the alien command structure, the fortress that had been the symbol of invader supremacy. Its walls were thick with energy shielding, its corridors patrolled by the deadliest of alien forces. But Mara knew their true weakness. It was not strength or speed, not weapons or armor. It was arrogance. They had assumed humans were fragile. They had assumed endurance equaled submission. They were wrong. The pulse guided Mara through corridors and stairwells, vibrating under her feet, whispering warnings, amplifying movement. Every squad she led moved as one organism, every soldier connected to the rhythm of the world, turning chaos into precision, fear into strategy, pain into a weapon. The aliens fired, but weapons misfired. Shields flickered, energy arcs backfired. Commanders screamed in disbelief as their soldiers fell to traps they could not anticipate, to attacks that seemed impossible. And then she faced the colossal figure. Its presence filled the chamber, energy radiating from it like a storm. It spoke, its voice a thunderclap in the minds of every human and alien present. You should be extinct. You should have yielded.
Why do you persist?
Mara stepped forward, bloodied, battered, unbroken. Her squad flanked her, every movement precise, every gaze unflinching. She did not speak.
Words were unnecessary.
Defiance itself had become their language. She raised her hand, and the pulse responded. The walls trembled.
Energy weapons overloaded.
The colossal figure reeled, caught in the resonance it could neither control nor predict. Time seemed to stretch. The invaders, once absolute masters of calculation, faltered. Confusion rippled through their ranks. Troops hesitated, unsure what was safe, unsure how to survive. The pulse amplified human intent, bending the battlefield to their will. Walls crumbled, floors shifted, energy arcs danced unpredictably. The humans pressed forward relentlessly. Mara planted the final charges in the command core. The countdown was silent, but the tension was palpable. Every soldier froze, every human heart beating in sync with the pulse, aware that what they were about to do could end them, or end the invaders forever. And then with a single motion, she triggered the sequence. The fortress erupted. Energy cascaded, walls disintegrated, corridors collapsed in waves of calculated destruction. Alien forces screamed, their weapons melting, their armor failing, their formations obliterated. The colossal figure staggered, its energy dispersing in arcs of uncontrollable chaos. It had not anticipated this, the unity, the precision, the endurance, the defiance of the humans. Outside, the battlefield shifted. The pulse surged, spreading across the city, through streets, across rubble, amplifying every act of resistance. Humans moved in waves, exploiting every fracture, striking at every exposed flank. Alien ships faltered, misfired, collided. Commanders shouted orders that were ignored. Troops scattered into traps they could not see, into ambushes crafted from pain and experience. Fear had become a contagion, spreading from squad to squad, ship to ship, until the once arrogant army of invaders was paralyzed with terror. Mara advanced toward the colossal figure. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, locked on hers, radiating power and intelligence. Its voice, now trembling, echoed again. "Why do you persist?" Mara smiled faintly, blood streaking her face. She stepped closer, raising her hand, letting the pulse flow through her, amplifying defiance into something tangible, unstoppable. The figure faltered, energy arcs misaligned, shields collapsing. Every calculation it had made had failed. Every assumption had been wrong. Humanity, fragile and underestimated, had become its undoing. The humans pressed their advantage. Every squad, every soldier, every survivor struck in unison, guided by the pulse. Alien forces collapsed under coordinated, relentless attack. The battlefield itself seemed to rise in defense of humanity, shifting, trembling, amplifying every act of resistance. Walls fell, energy arcs spiraled out of control, ships misfired, troops fled into traps. Chaos became strategy, pain became power, defiance became dominion. And then the final moment arrived. Mara stood before the colossal figure, unarmed, unshielded, human in every sense, but stronger than anything the invaders had ever faced. She did not speak. She did not flinch. She raised her hand one last time, and the pulse surged violently beneath the ground.
Explosions erupted across the city.
The alien command hub collapsed completely. Energy arcs discharged uncontrollably. The colossal figure fell, unable to resist the force of human defiance, amplified by the living planet beneath them. Silence followed. The invaders were broken, their arrogance shattered, their calculations worthless, their fear absolute. Humanity, fragile, battered, and underestimated, stood victorious. Mara lowered her hand. She looked across the ruins, at the survivors emerging from rubble and shadows. They were wounded, exhausted, scarred, but alive. Their eyes burned with the same defiance that had carried them through fire, blood, and unimaginable loss. The last word had been no, and it had echoed into history. For the first time, the galaxy saw what humanity truly was. Not prey, not fragile, not weak. They saw endurance sharpened into strategy, suffering honed into power, and defiance made unstoppable. Predators who had once ruled with certainty had learned fear, and in that fear, humanity found its ultimate strength. The pulse beneath the planet subsided slowly, almost reverently, as if acknowledging the species that had turned its power into a force of will. Humans stood among ruins, breathing, bleeding, defiant. They had survived.
They had fought.
And they had won. The last word was spoken, and it was no, no to surrender.
No to extinction.
No to the arrogance of predators who assumed victory was inevitable. Humanity had endured. Humanity had conquered. Humanity had changed the rules of the galaxy. The invaders had underestimated one simple truth. You could break their bodies, you could burn their cities, you could crush their technology, but you could never break their will, and that was the beginning of everything.